Is it a video? This buffering, alt staccato bingo. Suffering bingo. 5 senses. Spicy, yellow, loud, aromatic, proud. Right now sensing sin, though. Pride and clout. Maybe looking out is looking in, woe. That corner of the wall's my gallery. Sea spray my happily, blessed olfactory, the crafts of which I'm tired of having to imitate. Scratch and sniff lives from concentrate. Tactile makes the cat smile. Thank you, I appreciate your finger snapping.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Slam Poetry, the podcast where we slam each other.
Poetically.
So, welcome back to Solacene. Aaron, what was that poem about? What's this episode about?
I like your invocation of the term slam poetry, because indeed I was trying to imbibe it with some juice, as I think I told you pre-episode.
Mm-hmm.
Today's conversation is about Gretchen Rubin's book, Life in 5 Senses, which you've talked about on the podcast before, and I decided to give a flick through this week, and we're going to chat about from a Solacene perspective, as well as some other books that I wanted to talk about. So that poem was talking about 5 senses. You may have noticed the term scratch and sniff.
Mm-hmm.
You like scratch and sniffs?
I love scratch and sniffs.
I like scratch and sniffs too, but I just used it poetically, as in like our lives today are kind of scratch and sniff, talking about like the artifice of it. You know what I mean? Like Netflix is kind of like a scratch and sniff cinema.
It's true.
And I also use the term from concentrates, and I was just reminded of the main liquid that I consumed for the first 8 years of my life, which was the Robinson's fruit juice from concentrates, which I don't know if they really have in Canada so much, but in England it's like water, basically.
Yeah.
And blackcurrant was my choice. And basically the intention is you just pour like a couple centimeters into a cup and then fill the rest with water, because otherwise it's way too strong. But I would always just try and sneak more than you were really supposed to. And I remember one time I tried it just straight.
This explains a lot about you.
Yeah, my curiosity.
So, yeah, we're going to talk about Life in 5 Senses. I've talked about this book borderline endlessly, I feel like, on the podcast, because it's very Solacene in many ways, and it's not like Gretchen's not going to make an appearance.
No, it's up there with Lord of the Rings and Bad Luck Brian for just, we reference it every episode.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted Aaron to read some of it and just to kind of close the chapter on this book so that I don't have to keep talking about it, and I can just refer back to this episode if I ever want anyone to hear about it. So I learned about this book by watching the Happiness Lab podcast. It was a 2-part series where the podcaster was interviewing Gretchen, and she was talking about her new book, which just came out in April of 2023, so it's still pretty new, and it is
That's a 2023 book?
It is a 2023 book.
Wow, it's my first 2023 book.
Yeah.
Or maybe 2020's book.
Period.
Or maybe just 2000's book.
What was Aaron you read about 10 books recently, and you said the median age was the year 500?
Yeah, I was set out to write a novel, and to kind of prepare / get me through it, I had a list of 10 books that I was like, I'll read these as fuel, essentially, as references, as touch points, and then afterwards, for fun, I did the mean age that they were published. No, it was 1100. It was 1200-ish. It was around when Dante's Paradiso, that was like around the time. But there were some outliers, because there was a lot from like BC times, I guess. Yeah,
exactly. So the subtitle of this book is How Exploring the Senses Got Me Out of My Head and Into the World. And I think we can start there by maybe discussing that subtitle and how that relates to the Solacene. So the idea of the Solacene is partially getting out of your head and into the world.
Yeah, that's the 1/3 of it. You describe it as beautiful, sustainable, tactile. So today's all about the tactile, I think.
Yeah.
Hence, tactile makes the cat smile in the poem.
It's true.
It makes you think.
If cat is smiling.
I was thinking about like the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
But I like that tagline. I think it's somewhat ironic, because it's just how humans have lived for most of the time. Like, you have the book right there. On the back, there's also another quote that said it invites us into the seismic shift towards a life grounded in sensation, vitality, and innate intelligence, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the quote. And I was like, it's very tragic that this is a seismic shift. Because it's like, it's the natural way of being. So it kind of is implicit that there's been a seismic shift away from this sensation, vitality, and innate intelligence.
Yeah, and perhaps for the first time in history, these senses aren't necessarily being barraged in a negative way. Like, we can actually indulge in them because perhaps pre-modern times, things were really smelly.
Yeah,
we just dumped sewage in the streets, and work was just like so hard that you perhaps had to dissociate in order to get through the day.
That's true. The touch wasn't pleasant touch.
Yeah.
The smell wasn't pleasant.
But then now that we kind of have the benefit of soft couches, pleasant smelling air, a lot of nice things, it's like we've chosen to scratch and sniff instead.
Yeah.
Because we perhaps through human history to an extent have been used to having to check out. But it's like, really, this is probably the nicest the world has been in all of history post-Eden or whatever, like post-paradise.
Well, for those of us, like in Canada, like where we are, certainly the easiest.
Yeah.
Maybe we could just open by talking about Gretchen, like the premise of the book.
Yeah. She has done a lot of writing in her life. She's an author and a speaker and podcaster about the science of happiness and how we can live happier lives. And she is probably most famous for her Happier project, which I feel like not a lot of people, but like it was a New York Times bestseller book, read and enacted, and a lot of the tips in that surrounded mindfulness and being in the moment. And she had an epiphany one day when she went to the eye doctor because she's nearsighted and she has chronic pink eye infections. So she went to the eye doctor because she's like, this pink eye is getting out of control. Can you help me? And the eye doctor was like, yeah, of course, I'll help you. Then as she was walking at the door, he said, make sure you come up for your checkups. You're like 98% more likely to go blind than most people. And she was like, excuse me? Like, I never knew this. And he was like, oh yeah, because of your nearsightedness, your retina might detach. And she was like, wow, thanks for that information. And then she said her whole walk home, she lives in New York, so she walks, and on her walk home, she said that everything, it was like borderline a transcendent experience of like the nut cart smelt more vivid, the rumble of the garbage trucks was louder, and she just kind of like came into all her senses and realized that despite being someone who basically preaches mindfulness and being present and enjoying life, she hadn't been engaging any of her senses. She'd just been kind of going through the world. And then she set off on this project to write this book, but to explore her five senses. And her first task that she set herself was going to the Met Gallery every day, the Met Museum, and trying to go to the same place every day and use that as a sort of focus point for the project.
Yeah.
And another thing that she kind of noticed, she was like, she has 2 young daughters and her husband that she lives with in their New York apartment. And she was like, I didn't realize how much they had changed. Like, I didn't realize what perfume my daughters wore, or that my husband was wearing color now and he used to always just wear like black and white and all these different things. And she was realizing that like our memories are based on the senses, and she kind of had been living off of these old memories and not making new ones about the people she loved. And we'll get into love a bit later, but yeah, that's kind
a
of
good
it.
introduction. So the book is broken down into the 5 senses plus an intro and like a conclusion. I read the entirety of the, which sense, do you want to guess?
Smell?
Of the smell sense, just because I thought it'd be fun. I think it was the 4th one, so it was also kind of well placed because I got a mini summary for what had preceded, and I flicked through the rest of it, and you talked enough about it. I think I have like a decent grounding for it. I liked what you said about the memories, because that's something that I came to independently as well a few years ago, specifically talking about screens and internet time spent in the digital world by yourself. It's like you never remember any of this. There's no memory to it. And part of the reason is there's no sense to it. So I think maybe to start, at the end of the Life in 5 Senses book, you told me a couple of days ago, there's this sense self-portrait. that Gretchen did, where she lists like 4 or 5 things for each sense that are either her favorites or just define her. So maybe we could just run through the 5 senses of our own self-portraits that we did, and that will be fun for the listeners because they'll get to know some more about us, and the viewers because we're on YouTube. If you want to watch, engage the other sense. And also, like with each sense, we can kind of talk a bit about Solacene stuff or takeaways from the book, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Another, on the topic of the 5 senses portrait, I re-listened to the podcast yesterday that originally got me onto this book, and she was saying how the 5 senses portrait is a really great gift for someone, or like a good practice for like perhaps you recently lost someone to make a 5 senses portrait for them. And I was just like, that's so nice. Like, imagine
sounds kind
how...
of vain, though, no? Like, I'm going to give you a list of my favorite things?
No, about them.
Oh, the taste of them.
Yeah, but it's just like, I don't know, I feel like I would feel really warmed if someone made me, and perhaps to be accompanied by like a basket of like a nice candle that reminds, like...
Yeah.
Something, it just seems really nice.
So I say, like, I like when you make me cookies like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was having a really hard time making my portrait of myself, but for you, I basically could come up with one in like 2 minutes.
Oh, so you did one for me?
I didn't, but I'm going to see how my mental one compares to yours.
Okay,
so
well,
you start.
As a disclaimer, because I realized while doing this that we did do a Solacene 5 senses thing before, but this is more about ourselves. I think this is more like a personal thing. And another disclaimer, I tried to do it in hard mode, which meant no art. Like no music, no film, because I was like, that's kind of, like those are intentional things to sound good and to look good. And I wanted them to be more kind of everyday or like fundamental things.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Or incidental, let's say. So I came up with 2 for each.
Okay.
I'll start with smell because that's what I read. And the first one is the first day of autumn. I tried picking something other than this, but it was like, it's the first thing that came to mind, so I shouldn't lie about it. Yeah, I think that's like a favorite smell of mine. Actually, I said to you yesterday, it was only July 29th. I was like, is it me or is there a little subtle note of autumn in the air today? And you agreed, so there was.
Yeah.
And I mean, we know there's a storied figure, the autumn version of me that comes out every September and October, who just, I don't know, starts drinking the pumpkin spice stuff and wearing the plaid and all that. We're laughing because that's not what happens, but I do get weirdly bookish. And my only note for this is ignore the calendar, trust your sense. Because it always annoys me when people say, oh, happy first day of spring or happy first day of autumn. It's like, it's been autumn for weeks.
Yeah.
But just because the calendar says it, everyone has to abide by the calendar. No, forget the calendar. And the second smell is not something I enjoy so much as it's so distinctive and so kind of regular a sense, which is, I'll just say the word pajamas, and you know what I'm talking about.
Oh my goodness. Pajama smell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because for some reason, I don't know if it's our detergent or just the age of them, but you have a pair of pajamas that just... It doesn't smell good though, right?
It's just like it smells
It's borderline
distinct.
Wet dog. But I'll go for that.
Okay, my smells, I did 3 for each, are coffee. I feel like you can't really escape the fact that I drink coffee every day, and it's probably the strongest smell.
Yeah, I also had a question, like, what would the Solacene headquarters smell like in the future? And my idea was coffee. Just because I think coffee has this double meaning where it can be cozy, rainy day, inside coffee, but also it's like, nose to the grindstone, let's get stuff done. It's kind of unique like that.
Yeah, I agree. Coffee. My next one is the beeswax moisturizer, the Yay for Earth moisturizer. Do you agree with that?
Sure. It's a smell. I don't know if I like it that much. But...
No, these aren't my favorites. They're the ones that like define me.
Oh, define you. Okay.
Yeah. So I feel like this is the moisturizer I use every day and have for like 4-5 years.
Sure.
And then my final one is my shampoo, which I've also used for probably close to 8 years. Like quite literally since the day that the shampoo came out, I've been using it. It has a kind of honey smell to it as well. So I smell like a bee.
Yeah. Are we going to talk about the scents party? Or is that more of like a behind closed doors thing?
No, we can talk about that now. So in the book as well, Gretchen has her daughters quiz her on like different house smells. I feel like their house is going to reflect ours slightly.
Well, yeah. Well, during these smell semesters, she talks about how untrained most of our noses are, whereas, like, to an extent, we have pretty good eyes. Like, we can determine colors from colors, and we can see to some distance. Obviously, not Gretchen, but like in the general human sense. Whereas our noses are quite poor, and really there isn't much opportunity to hone it. And also the fact that you walk around the streets, you hold your nose, not in the Solacene because things won't smell like blood. But for Gretchen, she decided to remedy this because she lives in New York City. She said there's an opportunity to learn everything through classes by going to perfumery courses, which I thought sounded really, really neat. Like detecting the little notes and like training your sense of smell. We have spoken about our future children potentially having super senses. Like we kind of train one of them to be a dolphin who develops sonar or can hold their breath for really long. And one of them maybe can see like an eagle like from miles away. One of them maybe has a shark-like sense of smell, like a drop of blood, and they will detect it. No, but I'm not like to a fantastical degree, but we could improve on this, right?
Yes.
It's funny you mentioned the eye test thing because I obviously haven't listened to this Gretchen pod and I didn't even read the start of the book, so I didn't know about that as a foundational thing. But I have written down here, I used to always love eye tests. I think the 2 or 3 times I've done that in my life, I really enjoy it. Do you?
I enjoy it. I like all the little tests. Because it's like, when else are you going to know how good your eyesight is? And it's not like you really have any control over it. You can choose not to squint in the dark at your books, but...
I feel like screens probably don't have a good effect.
Yeah. Yeah, but our smell party last night, I quizzed Aaron on 4 different smells, and he got none of them?
Yeah, my nose is...
None of them.
My nose is like... Most people's nose is kind of bad. Mine is just awful.
Yeah, because I mean, one of them was literally shaving cream, and he had shaved his face about
6 minutes earlier.
Yeah, like not.
And I was like, I know this.
I
know this.
And I'm like, it's probably still on your face.
What did I say?
What did you say? You said something really strange.
Did I say lemon juice or something like that?
Yeah, you said lemon juice, I think. And it smells like shaving cream. What else did we do at the scent party?
You also arranged some gummy bears for us, 4 each, 4 different colors for each of us, and we had to try and guess them. And once again, I was 0 for 4. I think I guessed clear on 3 of them, and then the one that I didn't get clear on was the clear one. Yeah, I think you got 3 out of 4.
Something like that.
But also you arranged the colors, so...
I did. I didn't... Yeah.
You didn't know which one was which, but... Because I've always said that about candy. Like, people will debate about which Skittle or which Starburst or which gummy bear they like. And I've always said, like the inner glutton I am, I would just throw them in my mouth, like, indiscriminately. And so I always just taste sugar. It's like when all the colors mix together, they just make brown in paint. That's how I taste gummy bears.
Yeah, so we did that. We also did blind taste test of apples to try and guess which one was green, red, and pink. And you got those very well.
Yeah, I was pretty good at those.
You were very good at the apples. This man knows his apples. Then we did a few different things that just have like weird tastes or things we had never tried before. So we had candied orange rinds.
Yeah.
We had spicy pineapple soda. And I was like, it's not spicy. Like, I smelled it. It's like, just smells like pineapple soda. But then we drank it, and it's like your mouth starts to kind of burn. Like if you had a really strong ginger or like... Yeah, it was really weird sensation.
What are the takeaways from the sense party?
Really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It's going to be memorable, I think.
But like Solacene-wise, what are some lessons or something like that, or themes? I remarked that because one of them was milk.
Yeah.
And I smelled it and I couldn't smell it, but it was like but every day I pour myself a cup of milk and smell it and kind of breathe it in. So I think when you are like stripped of, because I also had my eyes closed as a thing. So like when you're stripped of one sense, obviously you develop the others more. And actually that kind of leads into my next one, which is sights. And one of my favorite sights is the movie theater when the lights go dim just before the movie plays. Because I feel like everything else kind of heightens a little bit. I mean, this is always annoying when it's like everything heightens so you can hear that person crinkling so loudly. Like you can hear them louder than when the lights were on.
It's true. It's true.
But that's one of my favorites. And my other favorite site, I didn't want to make them... I guess I accidentally did a portrait of you just because all my favorite things are related to you. I have a smell of your pajamas and the site. Do you want to guess what it is? It's the hair tucking into the shirt. That happens sometimes when you put on a jumper or something, and the hair just kind of tucks in and it looks like a hilarious helmet. I call it the tuck. You don't think it's a good style. I always want you to just wear it permanently.
Yeah.
But that's one of my favorite sites because it's funny. I like funny things.
Thank you. So mine are the sun sparkling through trees. I always find when Erin and I go on our evening walks, it's usually in the evening, so the sun is kind of setting, but it's not like sunset yet. It's just the trees are really, really sparkly, and I love, love, love how that looks. And this is a Solacene message to Erin. Stop and look at the sparkly trees.
What, don't I? Do I walk too fast?
Yes. And everyone else. Look at the sparkly trees as the sun is setting. Because I was staring at them a few weeks ago and thought, I wonder if this is every shade of green in the world. Because there's like the really dark parts because the sun is setting, and the really, really light parts. And it's just so beautiful.
People just listening wouldn't have seen me kind of roll my eyes a little bit. I don't want to offend you, but... Well, I wouldn't have offended you because I can't really roll my eyes.
It's true.
So it just looked like I was moving my neck around.
My next one is stripes. I'm wearing stripes right now. I feel like I wear stripes quite a lot.
Yeah, it looks like you're on a boat. Why do you like stripes? Just soothe your eyes?
Maybe the opposite. Keeps them alert. I just like stripes. They're Parisian, they're boaty, they're cool. I had for
Flags.
you...
Flags have stripes?
They do, yeah. The first thing that came up for a site for Aaron was his orange backpack.
Oh, no.
Because when we're in the supermarket or anywhere, I can always spot him.
Yeah.
We were on our travels last year, and out of all the people in the continent of Europe, spot you with your orange backpack.
His pumpkin backpack, doing the whole tour of the world.
Yeah, and my final site is piles of books. Because I make a lot of those. Do you agree?
Oh yeah, a lot of piles.
Yeah, it's like some
mounds.
I'm a big pile person.
I was thinking about how this book, the five senses thing, the exercise, it's kind of a way of living, right? Even though it shouldn't be. Like I'm saying, it should be more intuitive. It should be in the Solacene more of a natural state of being. Because I do think that we kind of either inadvertently or deliberately dull ourselves to a lot of things these days. Like living through the senses is kind of my ideal political ideology. I think that's called being an aesthete. So I was thinking about, like, for instance, used bookstores, right? Everybody loves used bookstores. And what do we love about them? The smell of the books, the look of things. They're never very clean. So for that reason, I'm opposed to gentrification. So I kind of like structure all my political views like this.
Yeah.
Is it ugly? Then I'm against it.
Yeah. No, I think this is important for the Solacene and for making any decisions of consulting the fact that, like, I mean, there's a balance, because I don't like when people are against windmills because of the noise pollution or whatever. Because it's like you have to an extent, look at the greater good.
But even aesthetically, like, I think you can acknowledge, I'm a big wind turbine fan, but it's like, they do sound loud.
Yeah.
But I think they look so cool that it overrides it. That's my opinion.
It's true, and it's either going to be a windmill in your backyard or a pulp mill or a coal mine. Like, it's obviously you're going to take the nice, sleek, white windmill that's like, it's a little noisy, but at least...
Well, I don't think it should be in people's backyard, but yeah, okay. I was also reminded of, we should have used this for the meme of the week during the internet semester, images you can hear. Like, that's such a funny kind of genre of internet picture. Usually be like macaroni.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's a picture of Waluigi saying something.
Yeah. And it's funny, or pictures you can smell. It's like the pile of old crayons and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so waxy.
We should do an episode, I guess that would be borderline ASMR, of us just describing things. Because when you just said that about old crayons, like, I actually did kind of smell it. I don't know.
Maybe it could be a short that we can make.
Also, Gretchen mentioned having a lucky scent. She said because scents are so closely tied to our memories, that she used this funny example of, like, Andy Warhol would deliberately try and exploit this almost by timing certain periods of his life to certain colognes that he would wear, so that then in the future, when he smelled that cologne, it would take him straight back to the 6 months. And she did that by like, oh, I had this smell that's when I was in college, this used to be like my party perfume or something. So like deliberately kind of invoking that. Have you ever had a lucky scent, or would you like one?
I've never had a lucky scent, but I've definitely, I mean, as someone who wears perfume, have them for different eras of my life.
I see.
Yeah.
I like that. That's funny.
Yeah, it is kind of fun. She also was mentioning how the olfactory center in our brain is right at the front where we make memories and where we like process information, because the nose is so central. Whereas all our other senses send the information further back into our brain, and it takes longer to process.
Yeah.
So that's why smells are so powerful.
Do you have any smells that take you right back to something? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, there's like this kind of specific smoky smell, and it's not like a it's not a campfire, but there's just like, we have these family friends who, I don't know what they burned in their fireplace, but like it smelled slightly different. And sometimes when you walk by like a steakhouse or something, it kind of smells like you could like blast me back and I'm like in their house. It's really weird.
For me, I have two. Maybe I should have used these for my smell, but one is like the artificial turf football fields on the hot days. That smells a lot like my childhood. And the other is much more niche. The other day I was walking around Montreal and there was just one road that smelled a lot like the way the road smelled when we went to Mexico.
Yeah.
Which was, it was weird because I guess it was just the temperature or the humidity matched it or something, or maybe the material or the type of dust. But yeah, it just reminded me of that.
Yeah. It's
really
funny.
Isolated memories like that, I think they're very smell tied. Because like we've only been to Mexico for 2 weeks now, or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But like not multiple times. So it's like it's a discrete kind of event.
Yeah, for sure. Also, cabbage always reminds me of my grandmother.
Was she a Cabbage Patch doll?
No, she wasn't.
Taste. Favorite taste. Taste self-portrait. You go fast this time.
Gluten-free flour in any form. Because it all tastes the same. Like, you can have gluten-free bread, gluten-free muffins, it all just tastes the same. Yeah. So that's kind of, it defines me.
Sure.
Yeah. My other one is double milk chocolate. So any, like a Kinder Egg, or there's like a Lindor double milk chocolate where it's like milk on the inside, like white.
Oh, white chocolate.
But it's not white chocolate. It's
brown
different.
and white.
Brown and white, yeah. Together. That's like my favorite. I remember when I first got my retainer. I've never really talked about that's unrelated.
Why would you?
Anyway, when I first got my retainer, I was like...
This is the Solacene orthodontics episode.
In grade like 2 or 3. Because I was like really young when I got them. And I couldn't eat anything. Except for Kinder Eggs. This is like the only thing I would eat.
Yeah,
and
you mean you wouldn't eat anything?
It was just like, I had no appetite. So that, and then cheese. So I'm a pretty simple...
Yeah.
I can't eat 2 of those things.
Oh, my
mouth
mouth
I'm allergic to 2 of them, but they're my favorite.
My mouth hurts too much. I can only eat chocolate.
Yeah.
You still do that to this day.
Sometimes.
Last week when you were saying, oh, I have a cold. No, I can eat the chocolate. I think I can do that one. My taste, I have gelato and then 3 question marks written beside it. Because I was like, I don't know if this can be a defining taste when I've only really tasted it
a few times.
Last year. It wasn't a few times though. We were in Europe for 3 weeks and we probably had it a dozen times. I don't even think I'm exaggerating. I think it's around a dozen times.
It was close to every day at one point.
Well, I think it was at least a couple times, multiple times a day. But I have the question mark because I've always like, I don't know if it's just the word or the idea of it. It's very kind of stereotypical, like bougie in my head. Where I was like, I'm not like that.
Yeah.
But then I discovered that I am kind of like that. But it doesn't have to be a thing. You know what I mean? I think with senses, we have some stereotypes where it's like, if there was some man who was like, oh, my favorite smell is black coffee, but only black coffee. I'll never do any of the cream or anything. It's like, you have an idea of what they're like. So I think if someone was like, oh, it's strawberry gelato, like you have an idea about that, what they like. But I guess we shouldn't really.
Yeah.
And the other one I had was breakfasts from our campus, our residence hall, when we were in undergrad. And I just have written down beneath this, unlimited with an exclamation point. Because this was a little bit more about the quantity than the taste. It was more about just having everything on tap, but still the taste of like that really like fake tasting scrambled egg, I think would take me back immediately to those days. And the weirdly kind of unmixed syrupy chocolate milk.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, now that I feel like as I'm going through this and reflecting on these are all kind of modern. Like, these are like my sense portrait for right now, and I feel like it's similar to you, like recent, Aaron. But I feel like it'd be different if you made a childhood one, and the childhood ones might be a bit less curated. Like, I'm thinking one of my smells would be like grease, because like my dad and my grandfather are always working in a barn, so it's like that's not something I would choose to have now. But I feel like in a Solacene perspective, perhaps, and what this book also really leans into is saying the senses that that define you don't have to be all curated and just like baby powder and soft toast. Like, it can be just like, yeah, the garbage truck smells disgusting, but it's like you almost want to smell it more because it's like an experience, like it's engaging you.
Yeah.
And I feel like she also recommends making a sense journal, which I did for a couple weeks, and it's really cool.
Yeah.
Of the things you notice when you start to kind of look forward to writing. You literally just write 5 things. You don't have to write like a whole paragraph about them, but it's cool of just like standout scents from the day, and maybe it was good, maybe it was bad.
Yeah, I like
it makes
that
you
idea
more
of
aware.
like huffing the garbage.
Yeah.
Or at least not holding your nose so badly. Because I think, yeah, that's very, very important for life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny to mention the journal, because one of the other books I wanted to mention today was Meditations by Marcus Aurelius that I've been reading. And not so much as an endorsement of Stoicism on the podcast, just because I don't know if this is the episode for that. But I like how, because this episode is kind of focused, I think, on the bringing about of a beautiful, sustainable, tactile world through the individual,
Mm-hmm.
rather than through the more structural things that we usually talk about. This one's more about how you yourself can be a Solacite, or at least start to perceive things as one. So something I like about the Meditations book is that you really get a sense of this was a man writing this for and to himself, because the Meditations was a title kind of retroactively slapped on there.
Mm-hmm.
I think what they used to call it was like, to myself. And it's not a great read all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason is because, one, it's so repetitive. Like, it's mostly the same 5 or 6 messages that he just repeats. And you can it's almost like when kids have to write something on the chalkboard and they're just doing it over and over to try and drill it in. You can almost feel that that's what he was doing. And the second reason is because it's very, very specific to him on certain occasions. And he doesn't explain it because it wasn't for an audience.
Mm-hmm.
So he will write like, remember what blank said. And it's like, we don't know who blank is or what he said. Or like, remember how he acts at the court. And it's like, well, we don't know that because it was for himself. So I think, yeah, that's just a point of advice, is like, journaling is really, really neat. Whether it be a sense journal or what happened in my day or a dream journal or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think like that's a useful grounding. I've kind of had an on and off relationship with journaling through all of my adult life, where I've always thought of it as like not something that I need to do more than once every 2 or 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But recently I like it's almost like Atlas pushing the stone up and then it rolls all the way back down. I like the idea of doing it every evening or every morning.
Mm-hmm.
And also I remember when I was a kid, when we first moved to Canada and I was kind of very socially isolated. I think I was age 9, and my parents recommended, why don't you start a journal or a diary? Because I liked writing and I had a bit of a skill for it. Do you want to know what I said to them?
It's for girls?
Yeah, I said it's for girls.
Yeah.
And they were like, what do you mean? And I was like, and Frank? Yeah, that's kind of dark, but that's what I said. And I think they just gaped at each other.
That's so funny.
Yeah,
but
sure. I remember saying that vividly.
And
That's
Frank, ring any bells?
Yeah. That sounds so bad. But I guess they could have said Greg Heffley.
They could have.
From the Dive Wimpy Kids.
It's true.
But yeah. Also, with the childish versus adult sense, I like that too, because there is a sense that maybe when we grow up, we feel we have to have mature tastes a little bit. And it has to be like, it can't just be, if it's cheese, it can't just be the Kraft singles.
Yeah.
It has to be like this very specific French brie from like a certain farm.
Mm-hmm.
And I do like the idea of, as I said, honing our taste buds and doing all this thing. But also I like the childish, kind of really simple smells and tastes and feels. And I think in the Solacene, what I have written is adults don't grow out of scratch and sniff or jungle gyms, or you know how those like child-oriented museums and discovery centers are always like push this, touch this, and there's always it's more of a 5 sense thing.
Yeah, for sure.
But adult ones, it's always like don't be too crazy. She even tells a story in the book about she was in a lineup in like a buffet style restaurants and was smelling a soup because she was like, I don't know about that soup. She wasn't like leaning over it or anything. She was just like smelling it, and someone in the line was like, "Oh, please," or like, "Come on," or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, but why though?
Yeah, let the girl smell something.
It. It's not like she's doing it right over the thing.
Yeah, exactly. This is really, I didn't even make this connection, but I feel like this is kind of the message of this episode of engaging your senses is like a form of activism, a grassroots activism. Hear me out. Don't stop rolling.
Well, that just
moving your head at me.
I feel like if that was clipped, then people would be like, "Oh, look at her."
No.
Maybe activist. Okay, let's hear it.
Hear me out. So there's like vote with your dollar. So you buy these sustainable products, and then the companies have to change and stop making unsustainable products. But that's like a consumerist perspective. And then other than that, it's like, what power do we have in the way that things are right now? But I feel like we have the power to notice the subtle things and use that to shape our activism and shape our voting and so on. So it's like you and I have an aesthetic opposition to cars.
Yes.
It's like we knew we hated cars before we knew what they did to the environment.
Exactly.
Because they're loud, they're smelly, they're cramped, they're hot.
Yeah.
So it's like if we use these senses in other ways, then you and I don't buy a car. And then we vote for people who don't like cars and so on.
Well, that's what I was saying about the used bookstore thing.
Yeah.
That's what informs me to be against gentrification. I don't know if that sounds very kind of unethical or like sociopathic or whatever, but I think it's a helpful thing.
No, I think it's good. And then it's like, if we could then get everybody living like this, then the people making the laws and the people making the products even are going to consider the kind of aesthetic manifestations of unsustainability and of isolation. And it's like, you can even just look at the town and be like, this doesn't feel right. Like, there's just like a vibe. But it's more than just a vibe. Like, there's reasons that you feel this way of like, it kind of feels disconnected and disjointed.
Yeah.
And then you can use that.
I think we're kind of summarizing the beautiful, sustainable, tactile message, or like explaining it a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. Which ones haven't we done? We didn't do hearing.
Yeah.
So for my hearing, 2 of them are kind of silly, so I'm not even going to mention. But the main one is you reading out loud to yourself. Ever since I've known you... This is always
so embarrassing.
What?
Because sometimes you come in and I'll be reading in French because I'm trying to learn French and I'll be practicing.
Listen to me.
Okay.
Our entire relationship, I even remember in university, I would just like doze off. We'd be like doing homework together, and then you would be reading your chemistry out loud to yourself. Like when you work, you read out loud, and it's the most soothing thing in the world.
It makes me sound like such a child.
No, it's nice. And it's one of my favorite sounds.
Sure.
You reading out loud to yourself. And it's not like you're reading yourself a story off like Once Upon a Time. It's just you're like, I wonder what. But it's not thinking out loud either.
Because it's okay, let's clarify. If I'm reading a book, if I'm reading a fiction book, I don't read out loud.
No.
But if it's, as you say, a chemistry question or something like that, or maybe I'm reading like a government form and I can't discern it, I'll read it, I guess, as if it's somebody reading it to me, so I can kind of understand it a little bit. But also there's the fact that we were in the same chemistry courses. Yeah. So I might have been reading it just to try and make you...
No, I think you were.
The equation for me.
I think you were, but I was dozing off.
My favorite sounds, I have wooden wind chimes. I really like the kind of island, like surf vibe of wooden wind chimes. That's obviously me to a T. I was specifying wooden because the tinkly ones, the metallic ones, not only do I dislike those, they terrify me. I remember there was my neighbor in Nova Scotia had those, and every time I would have to wake up early in the dark, especially if it was winter, to walk my dogs up until I was age 18, and those would be tinkling. I would just be so terrified because I'm scared of the dark and also creepy noises. So wooden wind chimes. And speaking of my dogs, my other favorite sound that I have here is my childhood dog's yawn, Sandy's yawn. You know the sound.
I know the sound.
Because it sounded like, I don't know, borderline a mini, tiny, cute pterodactyl and just a cat meow.
Yeah.
And because she was such a manly like masculine presence.
Mm.
But the yawn kind of reminded you that she could be dainty.
Yes, it's true. Okay, my touches
Yeah.
were my childhood pets. So along the same lines, they each have like a very distinct feeling. So I like all them. Yarn. I'm always touching yarn.
Yeah, you do
I'm always
touch yarn.
knitting, crocheting, what have you. And then finally, weeding. Funny enough, despite never having a job as a gardener, I think every single summer of my life in my job, I have had to weed. When I worked at a church, I had to weed. When I worked at a boat, I had to weed. And then now it's not part of my job, but I obviously work at the garden volunteering. So I feel like I'm always weeding. And I feel like that sensation of like pulling a weed out of the ground is really cool.
Definitely satisfying.
Yeah.
I had standing in water generally, but it kind of depends on different heights, because I like standing so it's just your feet covered. It's like clear water. I think that feels nice. I like standing on the beach where your feet kind of sink and it goes up to your ankles. But the first one I was thinking about was that one time in the Mediterranean is what I have written down. Because I've only been to that sea one time, but it was like one of the highlights of my life because it felt like a pilgrimage. And it also, we ascribed this strange, slightly uncharacteristic to us healing power that it had. Where afterwards we were saying like, look, it's my scab, it's gone or whatever. And we were talking about stuff like that. My skin is perfectly clear, just like things that weren't the case. But
it was the biggest placebo you've ever seen. But I mean, to be fair, it was the Sea of Corinth.
Yeah, it did feel nice. It felt very warm, salty.
Mm-hmm.
It was good. So those are our 5 senses. There was one quote from the smell chapter that I thought was quite key, which was that she said, I could be surprised only if I was paying close attention. Which doesn't only apply to smells, but to everything.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a way of describing how many of us walk through the world and kind of the disservice that it does to life, where it's like, if you are not really paying attention, let's say you have headphones in or something like that, or let's say you're even watching a movie on the treadmill, then it's like if something really crazy happens in the gym, like a cat jumps on the bench press and does a bunch of things, you kind of be looking at it and be like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
But if you were just running, my other touch was just the burn. The burn?
The burn.
You feel the burn, like during exercise. Because I've noticed recently that if I don't feel the burn during a day, I feel like I am dead.
Mm-hmm.
Or rather that I haven't lived.
Yeah.
So this is kind of similar to feeling surprised. There was one girl in my grade, all the way from grade 6 to grade 12, like middle school and high school, who was one of the few people who had the Solacene eyes, I'll describe them, and was just surprised by everything. So it's like if something kind of funny happened, she would full out laugh at it. But we'd all just be like, You know how, especially how teenagers are like really aloof? Just like, oh yeah, wow. Is that kind of ironic, like, wow. But it's like, you could be surprised, but like the first snowfall, it's going to kind of catch you by surprise. You should be surprised by it.
I like that. There was another quote. She quoted Carl Jung, and he said, the creative mind plays with the object it loves. And I think this is on a similar line in that it's like, yeah, you can look at your water bottle every day. But it's like, if you like love it, or like, not love in like a romantic sense, but love in the sense of just like, this is amazing that this can exist. And like, then you kind of find little things about it. And I think, I mean, that's a small example, but your apartment or your workplace or your route to work every day, like really just like you are alive and like you get to walk through this. And I feel like when you have that mindset, it makes you more creative, imaginative, happy, mindful. And it's just like, it makes you realize everything is interesting and everything is beautiful. It's like, really, there's nothing in the world that's like innately ugly if you look at it on like a molecular level. It's like, this is going to wow you, but you have to look and you have to pay attention in order to be surprised.
Yeah. The other book that I wanted to mention today is called Mindfulness in Plain English that I read a couple years ago. And it is a how and why to meditate kind of technique book. It gets into a little bit of the concept from like a Buddhist point of view, but mostly it's a very practical, like, these are the tips for how to meditate. And I just thought it was relevant to this discussion because I think the sense thing is basically just another way to mindfulness, which is really what all of us are missing and what most of us are chasing desperately, mindfulness. It reminds me a little bit of people always trying to extend their lives to live longer, to feel younger longer. That's kind of what mindfulness is, but rather than like making your life go from 90 to 100 years, it just makes you live for more of those 90 years. Like when you talked about Gretchen, like not having many new memories with her children, and parents always say, wow, they're growing up so fast, or like the years are going by faster and faster. I feel like in the last few years, since I've started paying attention a bit more to this, the years have gone slower and the days go slower.
I agree.
And that's what I really aim to do. And it's because I'm just trying to notice more. Yeah, notice more, I guess.
Yeah, like I really think it's doable to make your days feel like weeks.
Yeah.
And I mean that in like the best way possible, because some days like, oh, I just want the day to be over, but it's like at the end of your life, you're not going to have wanted those days to be over. So it's like you really need to, I mean, you're a great role model for this, but yeah, like squeeze the most of every day.
Squeeze the marrow.
Yeah.
As Professor Keating. Dead Poets Society.
Yeah. Do you want to pass me the organism of the week?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Since we're here? No. This one. So for anyone watching on YouTube, you can see the organism of the week this week. This is called a tree onion. Well, this is the flower of the tree onion. Do you want to describe it, Aaron?
Well, when you brought it home from the garden yesterday, I called it your magic wand. Because it looked like something that the good witch from the Wizard of Oz would have or something.
Yeah.
It's, what would you say, like a 7-inch green stalk with just several tiny bulbous cloves of garlic clumped on the end, as if they would be like, looks like a bunch of bananas growing, but they're garlic bulbs instead.
Onion.
Onion, yeah.
Yeah. So this is called a tree onion. So it's just like a normal onion. So there's the bulb that's underground, and then there's a long stalk.
It goes like this?
No, this is the flower.
Oh, okay.
So instead of on normal onions, this is a flower. But on this type of onion, it's a bulb of tiny onions.
Onionettes.
And then they're also called walking onions. So because it's so heavy, and they grow very, very tall up, the stalk would be like 4 feet.
Whoa.
And it's kind of swirly, and then it would lean over, and then it plants itself.
Oh, so
and they look like they're walking.
Cropped.
This is just the top.
Okay.
Yeah. And so those aren't edible either. Well, I'm sure you could eat them, but they're not like going to taste super good because they're to be planted. They're also called Egyptian onions, and they're a perennial plant, and they're just really cool. I really like them, and the onions taste like normal onions, but I just think it's neat how this variety is so unique within the onion family. There's a few others in the garlic family that do this, where they kind of grow these bulbs in the end and then they fall over, and I just think it's really beautiful, and it's like nature's pretty gorgeous sometimes.
Yeah, last week we did the potato, this week the tree onion.
Yeah.
Next week, stand by for something beet related.
Yeah. So at the end of the book, she gives a couple activities. So I think I'll close on that, then if you have anything else to say, you go for it. So for all of the senses, you can either overwhelm or deprive. So she quit sugar for like 6 months or something.
Yeah.
And then now she's like doesn't like sugar very much. I did that for 1 month and then have definitely decreased my love of sugar. And it's just like in different ways kind of overwhelming or depriving. So it's like doing like a sound bath. So you're really like immersed in sound, or doing like a float bath where you're floating and all of your senses are deprived, and it's kind of cool. She also said the daily visits experiment is good for all of these. I did this as well, going to a museum every day for like on and off for a month, and that was really cool because really when you go to a museum or a library, you just kind of go in and out for like one reason or another. But if you really try and go and engage all of your senses, it's a neat way to become more mindful and like hone that. And then one more thing for seeing is color walks, so like following colors that you see. So it's like maybe you're gonna like take a left turn if you see something pink, or like set yourself a rule like that. Hearing, she suggested making a sound apothecary. So kind of like a playlist or a set of playlists that you can play to change your mood. A record you put on, perhaps. She said to actually consider music. She said no one hates music. You just have to kind of see the root of it. She's like, maybe you just are a song person like her, who she doesn't like the whole album or the whole genre. She just likes songs in isolation. Another tip is changing your phone sounds to all be pleasant.
Yeah.
Because like you might just like hate your alarm in the morning. It's like, why?
Been there.
Yes, you have. Intentionally setting a sound you hate. Smelling, educate the senses. Each nostril smells differently, so like play around with that. And then increasing blood flow sharpens your smell, which I didn't realize until reading this, but it's why when I bike to work on garbage day, I feel like the garbage smells much stronger than if I was walking.
Yeah, she said some like professional tasters or like perfume makers run up and down stairs before working to activate.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Tasting, make a memory journal with your family. Have a tasting party where you can kind of compare preferences. She said it's so much more fun than a dinner party because the conversation goes to like childhood, it goes to preferences. It's kind of a fun way to make deeper connections. And that ketchup has all 5 of the major tastes. Fun fact.
Your organism should have been ketchup.
Should have been.
Or
you're right.
Whatever it's made of.
Who knows? Finally, touching. Touch is a really great way to bring yourself into the moment. So like, if you're ever feeling in your head, just like feel something, like stroke a blanket, stroke a pet, what have you.
Punch a wall.
Yeah. Touching, human touch is just like invaluable. So like we're quite isolated. So it's like maybe making a conscious effort to like hug your friends. That's it. And then the final one is kind of have an awareness of what textures bother you. I feel like we go through the world so much in our head that we're probably just like always irritated. I meant to ask you this earlier on, but like touch is probably my foremost feel. Like out of all of my senses, like obviously sight is, but it's like I'm really bothered by touch. And it's you can really just like cultivate your environment to be more comfortable, but we kind of ignore it. So,
and also listen to the Solacene podcast.